So you're talking about this freelancer you met. Um, Tell me a little bit about him, when you met him, and how do you met him, and all that stuff. And fill us in on that.
So a lot of guys used to hang out in the back of Jim Hanley's universe. My partner, Lou Gonzalez at the time, was gathering up artists so that we can start a company together. Mike Klein was one of those artists.
Hmm.
He had, when I first met him, there was like some kind of like weird spark aura, whatever you want to call it, around him. And I asked him,
Right.
"Do you work for Marvel Comics?" He was like, "No, I don't." And I shook his hand. And I was like, "Well, you will. I can sense that you will work for them very soon." And we both laughed about it.
Right.
And literally, like 2 weeks later, one of the guys that we were in the group with, we would meet at Starbucks after Jim Hanley's, and then we'd have meetings at Starbucks. There was a lot of guys that are actually writing comic books now in that group.
Right.
Um, one of the guys who's a big shot now is Vito Descalante. He was one of the writers that used
Right.
to meet up with us and chit chat. So anyway, so like Mike was basically like, there's this other guy that he was talking to that was in the group and didn't last. I forget his name.
Hmm.
And then he introduced him to some editors at Marvel. And then his brother was also best friends with the editor at Marvel. And then that's how he got in.
Right. Right.
Literally like 2 weeks after we spoke, it was like this weird. It was a weird time, a magical time in comics. That happened after I spoke to him.
Right.
Not that I'm taking credit for his employment, but just it was like one of those weird things.
So you can
That,
feel
that
it was in the air, as they say.
it was in the air. It was in the air. And so he started ghosting, working for Marvel, doing like submissions and stuff.
And what do you mean
For,
by ghosting? Because there might be people
well,
in the audience who don't know about
basically
ghosting.
they call them finishers now, but basically they would give him like unfinished work, and he'd work on backgrounds, or he would design characters and create characters
Right.
for them. So he started redesigning and reconceptualizing Angel, which was the first character he started working on.
Right.
Then he got connections with DC, and then he started do, doing designs for Supergirl for this guy, the guy who used to work for Image. What's his name?
Rob Liefeld?
No, not Liefeld. He was doing
Sylvester?
design. The guy who did Fathom. That
Michael
was
Turner.
Michael Turner. So Michael Klein was working for Michael Turner and doing some designs for him. And some of the, like when Supergirl was turning evil with Superman versus Batman, I saw a lot of that stuff being drawn. He designed the first
Hmm.
Supergirl in black with the white emblem.
Hmm.
And then like it showed up on a cover, and I just went to him. I was like, "Are you working for DC now?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm doing some stuff for DC." I mean, he didn't really advertise what he was doing. He was very covert and quiet about it, but I recognize his art style, so I would
Right.
see his artwork. Uh,
Right.
so yeah, he
Now,
just did.
uh,
That's just something he was doing.
one thing you did mention to me is that he got paid $15,000 a pop for a new character.
That's correct. Yeah, so
And
he
that,
would design a lot of stuff. So he was basically coming to meetings, listening to ideas, and then you'd start seeing them pop up in the books.
so what did you guys do when you started to see the stuff popping up in the books?
So we set him up. We,
Huh.
we said, let's think of the most ridiculous thing, because we talked about. He would always say, "Oh, like," because he never read a lot of Marvel comics in the past,
Right.
so he would always throw ideas out there. Um, when he was working for Marvel around the time of Civil War, look, like we talked about Spider Woman, we talked about a lot of different characters, and then we started seeing Spider Woman showing up in the books after 20 something years. Because
Right.
Jessica Drew died in the comics, like when we were kids, and then all of a sudden she's back in the book. We're like, whoa, they revamped this. And we're
Right.
like, oh, and then we're like, this can't be a coincidence. And then we started seeing all this stuff, and then I was having designs for Red Hulk, and that came later on.
Right.
Uh, but then we were like, when I saw House of M and Hulk had like was bald with like tattoos, I was like, dude, this is like right on the drawings I'm doing for my Red Hulk story. That I was trying to work with him, like butter him up to present it, and he was like, well, if we present it, then you're not going to get credit for it. I said, no, 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 no. I said, we got to get credit for this. I don't want to do this as a ghost thing. I said, no,
Right.
can't you talk to your editors and see if we can try to crack this nut with the Hulk and try to like make this happen because I have a great story. But then I don't trust anybody 100%, so I never showed them the story. I just showed them the drawings.
Right.
You know,
So you
so he
took the
had no
drawings and
idea
ran.
what this Hulk story was of the Red Hulk.
So
You
you took
know,
the drawings and ran with it.
basically, I'm sure he just drew his own stuff, presented it. He got paid for it. I saw photographs of him in the Hulk offices and meetings. You know,
Right.
like years later, he showed me on his cell phone, and I was like really annoyed about it. You know,
Yeah, because he's almost bragging to you.
yeah, he's bragging like, "Look, we did this whole thing." And then this is the he was the kind of guy that would say, "Oh, look, I had this great idea," when it's your idea after
Wow.
you said
So he's
it.
kind of bragging to you to your face that I stole it from you.
You're right.
So
But
in other words, he
in his
cut you
mind,
out.
in his psychosis, he created this idea. It wasn't your idea. He had like that Bob Kane mentality,
Right.
or that Stan Lee mentality, like, oh, this is mine.
Right. Right. And
You know,
that's a whole other different, there's
yeah,
a whole other thing too that a lot of people don't know that Bill Finger, Jack
right,
Kirby, and I know
right,
that there's resistance, particularly right now, about the whole Stan Lee thing because he just recently passed away, and I
right,
know there's gonna be a lot of pushback on that.
right,
But I think as time goes on and when people sober up and the
right.
sheen sort of washes off, we'll be
Well,
able
it
to
took
talk.
like 30 years before people started, like, Bob Kane was dead for like 15 years before people started talking about Bill Finger again.
Yeah,
You know, yeah,
because it
it's just
was
like,
him who came up with the whole bat thing.
right,
Right, and actually a wonderful book on that. I'll put a link to a lot of the pictures and images and even the book.
yeah,
The book is called The Tomorrow Men, I believe it's called, and it's all about the
right,
scamming of that goes on in the comic book industry, including that the
hmm,
reason that Jack didn't have the rights was because the contracts were placed on the back of the checks, uh,
right,
and
exactly,
you had to sign it in order to get your money. So
right.
they signed away
Yeah,
their
it's very
rights.
slick stuff that they used to do. Yeah, I mean that's the attitude of the industry.
Right,
Lots of stuff. So then we set him up with Spider Ham, and then we saw Civil War Spider Ham show up, and we're like, oh, that's it, just got done. We're not dealing with him anymore.
right,
He's not invited to any more meetings.
right, right.
Uh, you know, and he was very suspect because he would never like show us what he's working on. We were developing books and stories. We had an anthology come out called the No One Anthology.
Right.
And then when we went to print, he was like, "Oh, don't print my story. Don't print it." And he was always very weird, like not taking pictures. Like, he didn't want to be in pictures with us. Like, he'd turn his head. And we got a few together, but it was just like he was just very weird like that. He didn't want to go to conventions with us anymore. We used to go
So do
to
you think it
conventions
was?
as a group.
Do you think that it was probably because he knew that if he was seen, that later on, if you guys would be able to say, "Oh, we knew that guy, and he took our ideas."
Right. 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 Exactly.
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
laughing about it in retrospect because we were all young then. But it kind of gets personal as you get older, and you're like, you know. So when the Red Hulk came out, that was it. I mean, that was in 2007, and I was developing it in 2004, and I kind of let the idea die down because I was just like, well, I'm not going to work for Marvel. We're not talking to this guy anymore, whatever.
Right.
I never thought in a million years that he would take that over to them, because that was like something that I was playing with. It was almost like my little hobby. I'm going to draw this cartoony looking Red Hulk,
Right.
and that was kind of like my little fantasy about working for Marvel. Like, and I was building up this thing, literally building up this whole universe about him. A
So
story. I wrote a script about it, tied it into the Marvel universe, and
right.
then when it happened, I was just like. And
So
you could tell that they didn't know because the whole almost 2 years, they didn't have an origin story of who the Red Hulk is. They made it a mystery. They didn't know, they had like Betsy Ross come back to life. I mean, these characters were dead to make like Thunderbolt Ross Red Hulk, in no sense that he was
yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
And they made a Red She Hulk, which was Betsy Ross, who was dead. You know, um, it made no sense. Red Hulk was designed to be Bruce Banner.
Right. It was.
Uh,
You mentioned it to me. It was different levels, kind of like Goku. Right.
Right. It is exactly like Goku. Like I figured, you had the Gray Hulk, you had the Red Hulk, There was an annual many years ago where Hulk was blue for one issue because he went underwater to fight Namor, which is silly, but it's like, and I was like, well, Hulk is like different levels. And Dale Keown was like the inspiration for that because I think Dale Keown was the one that really got into the psychosis of the Hulk, you
Right.
know.
Right. He
And I
drew
was
it
like, well,
beautifully.
yeah, I mean, nothing against Kirby. I mean, Kirby established it, but Kirby's was more like a Jekyll and Hyde Frankenstein uh, combination. You know,
Yeah.
what him and Lee did was basically that. It was like a rehashing of. But when Del Keown came on, um, I mean, John Byrne too. John Byrne had Hulk, you know, switching personas where
Hmm.
Hulk became like sane, and then he had the whole Hulk Buster thing, and so I grew up
Right.
reading all that stuff as a kid, and I was like, well, Red Hulk has to be like the next level, you
Right.
know, like what would happen if the Red Hulk is like super intelligent, like we're talking about, like like like
Einstein.
the guy who's like an Einstein, or I was thinking like the more modern guy, the guy in the wheelchair. What's his
Oh,
name?
Stephen Hawking's.
Like a Stephen Hawking. It's like, what if like the Red Hulk is not a savage, raging Hulk, but he's like Stephen Hawking is like completely enlightened. But then when he turns back into Bruce Banner, he's like a raging, mad, crazy person.
Right.
You
Right.
know that. You know, so not to give him any ideas, but basically Bruce Banner would end up in a mental institution, and you'd have the incredible Bruce Banner
Well,
for like 1 year.
I'll
You
tell you
know,
one thing. If they're listening to this interview, you know that's going in,
yeah,
right?
it's gonna happen. Yeah, but I started to see things of like little things. Like there was an issue with Nightmare because I used to get the subscriptions, and Nightmare had there was a scene of him in a straitjacket, and I was like, what the.
Right. Right.
So it was like Bruce Banner. Imagine like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Bruce Banner instead of Jack Nicholson, you know.
Right.
But then
Right.
he's the raging Hulk, you know.
So my
So he's
questions.
more like the Indian more than the Jack Nicholson. He's more like the big Indian, you know. It's like,
Right.
uh, you know,
So my question for you is then, I had several different questions, but my first question is because you've told me
right,
about your youth and what happened to you with that teacher who was an editor, and then you have
right,
this Mike guy who, you know, pretty blatantly took your ideas. I
right.
mean, being a fan, because that's what excites you about these characters. I mean, how did that affect you on the fan side of that, looking at these companies and being treated this way? Were you
Oh,
expecting
it
it?
irritated me. I slowly started not to read them anymore because of that. I just started to try to pull away from it. Like I just felt like I couldn't trust anybody about, and even creative wise, there were so many writers in that meeting room that you know I started downsizing. Like I don't want 17 people in our group. I want to be able to deal with people one on one. Like we even used to meet in the shopping mall at we used to be in the shopping mall and draw like just draw jam like what was it called AMS, or actually it was called Manhattan Mall at the time on 34th Street. And a lot of
Hmm.
people that used to come through and draw and jam with us, like Kenny Dillard. I mean, there's like a lot of like, and then like Afua Richardson. She was one of the people that used to come through, and Chuck Collins. We were all just people just meeting each other and drawing. It was kind of like a real. With the artists, it was cooler. With the writers, you couldn't really trust them because they're not really talented. You know, it's like
Oh, rough,
right.
rough,
You know what I mean?
rough.
Like I was less threatened by the artists and more threatened by the fucking writers. You know? But it's like, but we had, you know, we had a lot of cool times, you know. And then we from Starbucks to the Manhattan Mall, and we did meetings. Then we had meetings at my house, and we met Chris Duckett, and we had meetings at his house. And then eventually Bronx Heroes got formulated and put together.
Hmm.
And then people fell off. Like whoever didn't, like you know, we put deadlines, and we were like, let's try to get a book, and most people didn't fall through. Then we met these guys from Creator One Comics, like Gary and Ed, and we worked with them for a little bit.
Right.
So we just kind of just like really like squeezed it down and said, let's try to focus on those who are going to produce for a book.
Right.
Because it
So,
was fun to just meet up and draw and hang out and talk about ideas. But once we were already getting ripped off by this guy, we were just like, let's break away from this, you know,
so my question
and
is
not
to
be
you.
so public,
My
you know.
next question is
Like,
this:
like
You've
I'll tell
got
you something really ridiculous. When
what?
he was working for DC before this Hulk thing happened, uh, I was working on a story called The Superhero Killers, and we were at a comic convention, me and Chris, and we are sitting next to I was selling pornographic superhero comics at the time
Okay.
called OD's Helpful Hints,
Right.
and then we had A World Without Superheroes, a comic. So I was selling those two books, and and I'm sitting next to this guy again at Big Apple, right? Um, and there's a lot of people there, like these English guys and stuff. And
Hmm.
the guy, that was I'm looking up his name here right now because I don't remember his name, but I was sitting next to him, and we were just showing. All right, so we were just showing, sharing stuff with these guys that worked for the industry because it's a comic convention. You were there with a weekend,
Right.
and this guy Derek Robinson, was like looking at my stuff. He's like, "This is crazy. This is psychotic." I was like, "This is the future. It's gonna be like porn and superheroes and shit like that." And then
Right.
now Derek Robinson has a show on Amazon called The Boys. You know,
Mm.
we had a ash can book that we were trying to push forward that really didn't go anywhere. It was called Superhero Killers, and it was about these lawyers that basically release villains from prison and then hire them to kill superheroes. And then Derek Robinson's looking at this ash can. They gave him copies of, it's like blatant. And then the boys come out later on, and then we're like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's just like, and at that convention, we also had the guy who used to draw Hellblazer and Preacher covers. He did a sketch for me that day. We were just, everyone was learning after doing conventions that you can't always share your ideas with people just because they're creators,
Right.
you can't be that open.
No.
So, I mean, The Boys has a lot of similarities to A World Without Superheroes. It's not exactly alike, but it's almost like they took the porno comic of the superhero book that I was doing, the parody, and then took the superhero killers, and then took the World Without Superheroes and just kind of like merge all three together. You
Right.
know, it's just like it sounds ridiculous, but true story. I know like 10 people in my group that were there. We were there. We saw it
Right.
happen. And when the boys came out, we're like, what is this? Uh, you know, we were putting out titles. Another one with the guy Mike, like he was asking about Green Lantern at when he started working for DC. And then at this point, I was really pissed off about everything that he already did. And I was
Right.
like, he was like, well, what would you do to change Green Lantern? I was like, what? I said, I just gave him a dirty look. I said, well, you could Green Lantern is limited and he's boring because he's just green and yellow. I said it should be like the Power Rangers where there's a different color ring and then it's like and then Hal Jordan gets he has to acquire each color of each ring to get a new power, a new ability, and then at the end he becomes gay. And I said that as a joke, and I was like, and I walked away from him. But then
Oh.
what happens? You have this thing called Darkest Night with the zombie, and in our superhero killers comic, we had a character called the Dark Lantern, which is basically like Green Lantern but black, like a black power. So
Right.
then we had this zombie Blackest Night that came out, and I was like, look at this. I can't say a thing to this guy, not even insulting him. I can't even insult him because now we have this thing with all these different color power rings.
Wow.
And then the New 52 comes out with that book when I got sued by by DC Comics and Marvel. When the New 52 book came out, they actually made the Golden Age Green Lantern and made him younger,
Right.
and he was gay. So I was like, I can't
Wow.
even tell this guy off, like to go himself.
Wow. But it shows you were feeding him through all this stuff. Now, one thing I was going to say to you, you met this guy by accident, right?
Yeah, it was accidental.
But I imagine that there are more than just one Mike kicking
Oh,
around
there's tons.
the industry and conventions in particular, who you never know who's sitting next to you. Usually,
Right.
you,
Exactly. You don't.
and who's buying your stuff and who's taking photos of your banners
Tons of people.
and everything else.
Right.
And that's something that I think that most creators need to know about. That ultimately, you just can't put that much trust. Unfortunately,
And you
it's
have to be
such
very
a
careful what you say because even something in a joke or in an insult, that you're feeding people who have no ideas.
right,
I'm not going to say, hey, I wrote that from Jeff Johns or whatever. What they wrote is what they wrote. But I was just telling this guy off to go because of the whole Red Hulk thing.
right,
And
Right.
he has the nerve to come back and ask me about Green Lantern. Like, go f- yourself, it's
So
like,
he literally takes your whole joke and turns it into something. So it's like literally you're being harvested.
literally, and and these people are very. There's a lot of them, and now I can tell when someone's doing that. Like they're like, "Hey man, can you get me published? Can you work with me? I got these
Well,
ideas."